Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Sven Berg Ryen and I'm here to tell you a bit about GDPR modules in Drupal. We're starting this live web seminar now, and I will just give the people a few seconds or minutes to join, and then we will start the presentation. So before we begin, I can introduce a little bit about myself. I am a developer working at Ramsalt, and we are hosting this webinar together with Drupal Norge. And I'm here with Daniel, who is our guy in Oslo, and also maybe Yngve, our CEO, may also join us a little bit later. So we are going to give this presentation first, and then afterwards we're going to open up for some questions. So there should be some kind of live chat appearing here, and you can use that in order to submit your questions during the presentation. I'm not watching the live chat while I present, but my colleague Daniel here is looking at the chat, and he can interrupt if there's anything that comes up while I'm presenting. So it says here we have 5 people watching, and that's a good start. We are recording this, so if you know somebody who will benefit from the seminar, you can direct them to the link, which we will make available afterwards. So don't worry if you don't watch it live, it's going to be useful and available afterwards. So I think I'll just start by saying a few words about myself. I am a Drupal developer, and previously, I've lived overseas, and I've been a Drupal meetup organizer since 2010. I also organized the 2 Drupal camps, and I have contributed quite a lot to Drupal 8 to translate the core into Norwegian. And I'm also the maintainer of the EU cookie compliance module since 2014. And over the last couple of weeks and months, I've spent quite a bit of time putting in additional functionality into the module, which is useful with regards to GDPR. And that's what we will tell a little bit more about here in this presentation. So when it comes to GDPR and Drupal, there's probably lots of things. You have probably lots of questions in generic about GDPR, and there's also all these questions that comes up because we are handling a database, and some of the data that we store in our database are personal data. So one important aspect of GDPR is the consent. And previously, it was possible just to display a banner at the bottom or top of the screen saying that we are using personal data, we're sending them here and there to Google Analytics and to 10 and dozens of other services, and we can not be sure if that's legal anymore to share personal data like that. And now the change in GDPR is that the consent should be opt-in. It should be an affirmative action, and it should also be possible to withdraw this consent at a later time. Some of the most frequent questions I get is how I block Google Analytics until the consent is given. So we will look at some strategy for achieving that. The EU cookie compliance module, which I'll demonstrate later, has a feature that enables or it disables certain scripts until the consent is given. We can also, I'm also going to demonstrate or talk briefly about the module that prevents users from logging on until consent is given. There's also questions about how IP addresses are being stored in the database. Can the user export all this data? What about commerce? We need to keep some records for accounting purposes. So how can we achieve that without breaking GDPR requirements? And what about our developers? When we download a backup or we download the entire database to work on locally, how can we make sure that none of the private data is transferred and is floating around in the Office environment. And last, there's also some module in Drupal called Simple News, and also when people subscribe to Simple News, they also need to make sure that their data is being handled properly. So in this presentation, I'll look at these modules, which you can see a list of here. I'm not going to look at them in detail because we don't have time for that. I am going to give a demonstration of the EU cookie compliance module. And you can see here a list of all these modules. Some of them have been released quite recently, so the number of sites using them is not so high yet, but I've been updating this table a couple of times, and some of them are seeing double in the number of people using them per week. So it's definitely catching on, and more people are getting more up to speed about how they can be more GDPR compliant on their sites. So as you can see, some of these modules are available for Drupal 7, some are available for Drupal 8, and some are still in sandbox mode. So you'll have to deal with lots of alphas and betas, and probably also refer to the issue queue a little bit if you want to use some of these modules. So let's start by taking a look at the GDPR module. This is a module where there's lots of development happening, and Balu Ertel is the person who's responsible for that one. And this module has certain features. There's a checklist for the site admin, which includes automated content, module and configuration discovery. And it also displays the current status. So you will have a progress bar, and you can see how many steps you are left from being fully GDPR compliant. Of course, when it comes to these things, you should always consult a legal advisor. There's a disclaimer here. I'm not a legal advisor, so I'm not giving you legal advice right now. But the GDPR module goes a good way to at least making you aware of the things that you need to do in order to be GDPR compliant. It also links to other modules that provide features that the module itself doesn't provide. So it's more like a starting point, and you can branch off and see what else you need to do when you have to become GDPR compliant. It also has some sub-modules. There's the GDPR consent module, the GDPR fields, and also a drush command available. Then comes EU cookie compliance. This is a really old module, and it's been available since Drupal 5, I think. What it does is it displays a cookie notification banner, and it has lots of other interesting features you can toggle on or off. It also offers three main ways of handling consent. There's the opt-in consent, the opt-out, and also the old way of handling consent, which was just to handle consent by default. And there is also a fourth option, which deals with the do not track header, which is being sent from the browser. As a feature where it collects GDPR consent before allowing users to log on. And what it basically does is it locks users out until they have given consent. So if you have a site that people are logging on to, you can look into this module, and it will help you quite a bit. There's also the GDPR form compliance, and this has a nice way of handling it, because you can give the form ID, and then by form ID you can specify which forms should be given an additional checkbox. And I think it also has a way of linking to the privacy policy, so the user can become aware of the current privacy policy and then accept this before they register or use basically any form you have on the site. So this is a module that's upcoming and worth looking at. There's the GDPR export module, and what it does is it allows the user to export all his data. This is one of the strange requirements with GDPR, is that the data that you have on file for the user should be possible to export in a transportable format. So in most cases, I guess that would be JSON or XML. And if there's possibilities of the user using his data in some other way, it should also be possible to import it elsewhere when it's been exported. But mainly the incentive is that the user should export it, and then it can handle the rest on its own. It supports the core fields and also the address field, the date, and field collection. So now we're getting to the point where we have stored some user data in our database, and when we do our backups and our local development, we want to make sure that we don't have the email addresses, the names, and other personal data on file. So this module, the Scrambler module, basically scrambles all the user data. It's available for Drupal 7. But then if you are on Drupal 8, there's the mask user data module, which basically does the same thing. It scrambles the user data, and it's available, I think, both for Drupal 7 and 8. So you can, if you're on Drupal 7, you can evaluate both Scrambler and mask user data and see which ones are most useful for your usage. The IP_anon module, IP anonymize, is a module. It's a great module that makes sure that you don't store any IP addresses in the database tables. So you can choose to have them scrubbed on the cron run, and it cannot guarantee anonymity because they are recorded temporarily, but of course, IP addresses may be logged elsewhere in the system, such as a web server or the error logs. But at least in your database, in the Drupal database, you're not storing any IP address this way. And it has nice support for Drupal 8. Sessions, comments, database logging, web form, and YAML form are supported. And for Drupal 7, it supports the same. Well, not YAML form because it's new to Drupal 8, but it supports the same features and also the statistics. There's support for UberCart and voting API. This module has been around for quite some time. There's currently 518 sites using it, and it probably will get some spike now that GDPR is taking off. Cryptolog is a module that does the same, some of the same things. It enhances the privacy by logging some identifiers rather than the client IP address. It has some requirements. You need to have a caching module such as APCU, Memcache, or Redis. And what it does is it stores a random identifier for each user, and then it uses that identifier for 24 hours before it's refreshed. So technically, you can, within the time frame of 24 hours, say that you are or see the actions of the user, but it should at least be much better than storing the actual IP address in the database. And it works by altering some functions in Drupal, overriding them. And when it stores them, it stores the random data instead of the IP address. Commerce GDPR is fantastic when it comes to shopping carts because it has two ways of handling the anonymization. There's manual mode, and there's also an optional mode, which is automatic after a period of days. So this means that you don't have to worry about storing the personal data of the user if you're storing data in commerce for several years. It can be handled in such a way that the user himself says that I don't want you to keep track of my data anymore. I'll click this button and you'll forget that I ever shopped here. But at the same time, for accounting purposes, the data is still there in the database. And you can also set it up so that it automatically expires the data after some days. Then we are coming to the, this is another module which is not the sandbox module. This GDPR Tag Manager works with the Google Tag Manager data layer, and it gets the IP country codes, it locks up the codes, and then it gets the anonymous user's country code without breaking cache. There's an option to add a cookie so that the action only happens one time, and you can also show a cookie consent with this module. And there's facilities to disable this pop-up when for any North American IP address. I think this module is also, it's fairly new for Drupal 8 only, unfortunately, and it's still in active development. There's the F1 GDPR module, and this is the module you want to use if you want to disable Google Analytics until the user has given consent. It works in collaboration with the EU cookie compliance module, and it means that the Google Analytics code will not run unless the user has given consent that he can be tracked. There's another sandbox module for the backup and migrate sanitizer, and this module makes sure that the username, password, login, name, and surname is removed from the database dumps, and then you can provide this dump to the developers. And the difference between this one and the two that we looked at earlier, the ones which scramble the data, is that the data is changed only in the database dump when you're using the backup and migrate module. So it will not change the database values. And then if you download a copy of the database, you will still have to run those two other modules for Drupal 7 and Drupal 8 when developers are getting them. But this is useful if you're not handling so much local data, local databases, and you want to make sure that there's no personal data in the database dump. You can use this module. Last but not least, there's the GDPR Simple News module. It makes sure that it adds a GDPR consent feature to the Simple News subscription form. And this way you can easily turn on this module, and it can make sure that you're GDPR compliant when it comes to newsletter signups if you're using Simple News for your newsletters. So those were the modules I was planning to cover. I'm now going to change from this presentation, and I'll give a short overview of the EU cookie compliance module, and you can see which features it has. So I'm going over here to this site which I have set up with EU cookie compliance installed. And it started with a very basic module where you had a cookie information banner. There's a cookie information banner message, which by default is in English. There's also some buttons you can configure. For example, this agree button, the no thanks button, and also a more info link, which takes you to the cookie policy page. There's a thank you banner. This was added before I was added as a maintainer to the module, and personally, I'm not really sure why you would want to have a thank you banner. It's enough annoyance to the user that you're displaying this banner and asking for consent. And what you really, in my opinion, don't want to do when you've done that is to show yet another banner that the user has to dismiss. But there are some people who use this. It's disabled by default, and it has the same configuration basically as the information banner. And I guess I can say it's here for historic reasons. It's been added to the module as a point, and we try not to take out features from the module when there's so many people using it. There's also a link to the privacy policy, and if you install this module on an English website and it has a cookie policy or a terms of conditions page or some text title that looks like it's a cookie policy, it's the module, when you install it, does auto discovery, and it automatically links up the privacy policy link. If it can't for some reason find the cookie policy link, or if you're installing it on a website where you don't have any nodes, it defaults to the front page, and you will get a notification in your report page. It will give an error saying that you haven't configured this, so you can easily see that it's missing and resolve that. There's an option here to open the cookie, the privacy policy in a new window. And those were the three main features this module had. There's also some nice features here for site builders. It's possible to choose whether the banner appears at the bottom or the top of the screen, and you can choose the text color and the background color of the banner. You can also customize how tall it should be. If you leave this feed empty, it will shrink down to the size that will fit your text and content. There's also a possibility to set the different widths of the banner if you don't want it to take the entire screen width. You can set it either in pixels or in percentage. And you can see the banner here at the bottom of the screen with the current configuration. When you install this module, it automatically enables the banner. We had some previous versions where you had to tick this box to enable it. That's done automatically now because we had quite a few requests coming in saying that the module wasn't working. I've installed it, and because of that, it's now enabled by default. We also automatically set the permission to be visible for any roles on the site, which was also a problem before because you had to go to the permissions matrix in Drupal and enable the banner for the roles that you wanted it visible for. So that's also taken care of automatically now. And if you have the authenticated users, if your users or administrators shouldn't see the banner, you can choose to turn it on or off for whichever roles you have configured on the site. This is a small test site, so I don't have any more roles on this site. So let's switch over and look a bit at what features this module makes available for GDPR. The first one in this list is the consent for processing of personal information. And there's a explanatory notes here about the GDPR in case some person hasn't been watching the news and seen that GDPR is everywhere these days. There's 4 methods of consent. The old way of giving consent, which is to not provide any option to opt out, just display a banner and say we are tracking you, but there's nothing you can do about it. There's opt-in, which doesn't track visitors unless they specifically give consent, which is the one you're seeing at the bottom of the screen. There's opt-in, which some people have requested, which will track visitors by default, but they will also give people a way of opting out if they choose not to be tracked. And the fourth option is automatic, if you want to respect the DNT, do not track setting in the browser, if the user has set that. So it uses the opt-in method if DNT is turned on. And if if do not track is turned on, it uses this one. But then if do not track is specifically set to track the user, it uses consent by default, so that if the user has said that, okay, I'm fed up about this tracking, I want to be tracked, regardless of who and where I'm being tracked, you can choose this fourth option, and it will alternate between opt-in and consent by default. Probably it will display opt-in in most cases, since not many people are aware of this header, and very few people have probably set it to allow tracking. There's features here for disabling JavaScript. So when consent is not given, it's possible to enter a whole bunch of JavaScripts here. So if you have modules like add to any, you have shared this, you have many other modules which add tracking banners, and you might have created some custom ones for your ad system and things like that. This is where you can enter those JavaScripts. Some of them are offsite. You enter them with the leading HTTPS. And if they are local to your site, you enter them without the leading slash. So just the URL that you find in the settings. We will take a look at this later. Cookie handling allows you to whitelist cookies, and how it is currently being implemented is that the cookies that are not on the whitelist, they are being deleted. So any cookie that is set on the domain gets erased every 5 seconds, which is a way that you can ensure that people who come to the site and they haven't given consent are not leaving any cookies that can track them. This works, but it only works for the cookies that are set on the domain. So for cross-domain cookies, this unfortunately we can't handle that with this module right now. There's also a requirement in GDPR that you should be able to store a record of consent, and there's a plugin manager available both in Drupal 7 and Drupal 8. In Drupal 7, it's a CTools plugin manager, and in Drupal 8, I'm using the standard storage and other. So I'm using the standard plugin manager features available in Drupal 8, and basically you can look at the code in the module, and you can see that we have consent storage plugins. So you can look at the consent storage plugin for the basic storage if you want to create your own storage mechanism. The default option is do not store, because the basic storage mechanism, it has two shortcomings. First of all, there's no journaling, so eventually you will fill up your database with consent from users if you have a busy site. And secondly, it also can slow down your site, because every time somebody consents to being tracked, it will write to the database. So possibly somebody hopefully can come up with a more bandwidth friendly way of storing consent that's more advanced than what the module currently offers. And if you want to do that, it's really nice if you can contribute it back to the community, either as a patch to EU cookie compliance, or you can just create your own module, and the plugin manager will make sure that when you have a plugin in your module, it's going to show up here on the configuration page so that people can enable it. There is also a new way of something I had to add to the module to handle GDPR is the withdraw consent feature. And what it does is it pops up a tab after the user has given consent. It pops up a tab. So, for example, I say that it's currently enabled here. I think that's the default option. So if I say here that I agree, it's going to show this tab at the bottom of the screen here. And when I click it, it gives me a way to withdraw consent. And currently that reloads the page and the banner is back again. So it's is a feature that I think is going to be worked on a little bit more to make sure that we also handle the case where somebody says no thanks, and then they change their mind because they realize that they haven't given consent, and now there is a feature on the site where you need to be tracked, and you can't really get back to the situation where you had a banner without installing something that handles your cookies and deletes the cookie that the module has set, and only then will we get back the feature. So this feature is in need of a little bit more work, but it does the basic handling quite nicely. I have a test site set up here. I have 2 nodes at this site, and currently I've added also the add to any sharing button. It has these nice features where you can easily share to social media, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, a whole bunch of other features that can be turned on or off as you desire. And we have a problem here because the user hasn't given consent, and we know because we know that he should not see this list of links because we know that they are probably tracking his IP address behind our back. And there is a way to resolve that here in the module, and how you will handle that is by looking at the libraries file in the module. This is the libraries file for the add to any module, and you can see that there are 2 JavaScripts being loaded. So we think that if we make these JavaScripts, if we prevent them from being run until the user has given consent, we shouldn't see these buttons anymore. So let's give that a try. We have 1 external and 1 internal path. And I'll just copy them from here to save us some time. Find the field for disabling JavaScripts. I'll paste them in, save the settings, the configuration. And then when I reload this page, if everything works, we should not see the social media links because the user hasn't given consent yet to be tracked. But then as soon as the user says, okay, I agree, you can track me, boom, they are back. And that happens without having to reload the page. They're simply just injected into the flow of the page when the person gives consent. And then the user can go here to privacy settings, and he has a nice drawer where he can also withdraw consent if he wants. I think that covers everything I wanted to show you. There's some additional features. There's a very nice feature with this module, which I can open up the administration page on Drupal 7, because in this test site I have those modules available, so you can see how it looks like. So for EU countries, we have a feature that relies on one of three options. There's the GYP module, Smart IP module, or the PHP library called GYP, and a function in that library called GYP country code by name. And it enables you to only display the banner in EU countries. There's also a very nice feature here if your site is on Varnish, where you can choose to only display the banner for people who are in the EU countries. And if you enable one of these, you will make sure that the banner is seen by everybody in the EU, but you don't annoy people outside the EU with the banner if you're concerned about this. And there's several other cookie banner modules available for Drupal, but this is the only module that provides this option. There's also some advanced features here, some of the features that people seldom use, but you can also, for example, change the cookie name. And the question is, why would you want to change the cookie name? There's a good use case for that. For example, if you had an old cookie policy and you changed it into a new policy where you have different content, and you want to change, you want people to give consent again, then what you can do is you can write new policy version 1, for example. This will trigger the banner for everybody again. And then if you later change the policy again, you can choose version 2, and the banner will again reappear. So that is the way you can ask people for consent again if you need to do that. There's various other features here. For example, you can exclude the banner for user ID 1, and you can choose a different lifetime for the cookie, and things like that. And you can find them in the advanced feature section. I think I covered everything. So at this point, let's jump over and see if we have any questions to the presentation. Can Daniel read it out loud, maybe?
Yeah. I regard the example as catch-all message for cookies, which is, from my understanding, something GDPR and e-privacy directive explicitly want to avoid. Have I misunderstood the meaning of this?
Yeah, this is the current implementation of the module, and I think it's better to at least have opt-in for cookies instead of not having any way to opt in and out. I agree with this that there should be some grouping of cookies. Some cookies are essential for the site, some cookies are for tracking, and some are for other purposes. And it would definitely be a good idea if we could offer a way for the user to decide on a more granular level. This is not currently offered by the module, but it's definitely something that other people have asked for as well. So patches are also welcome here. It's something where the Drupal community can get together on and collaborate on.
Marlon is asking, does the store consent work with caching reverse proxies, like, for example, Varnish?
Good question. I think, Marlon, if you can test that and report back in the HQ if it's not working, that would be great. I haven't tested it with Varnish. That's the answer to that.
Okay, I think that's the questions we got. So maybe we give it a couple of minutes and have people come in with new questions. Yeah, it looks like we're good here. So maybe we conclude this webcast.
Yeah, and I think we can conclude with saying that if you are looking at this presentation as a site owner of a Drupal site, either in Norway or somewhere else, you should, and you haven't quite worked out how you want to handle GDPR, this is probably the time where you want to give somebody a call. Maybe it's your legal advisor, maybe it's your Drupal agency, and there's Drupal agencies available in Norway that you can talk to if you want to know more about how to handle GDPR. So thank you all for watching, and good luck with the GDPR work.